Hello, it's me, the Simon. I am here to give you my review of the Matrix 2.0 ADD Xmas Edition. Yeah, it's a keyboard. It's most definitely a keyboard. Now, generally, this is when I would show you some B-roll and be able to read off the specifications of this board. There are no specifications for this board, so enjoy the B-roll as I figure out the specifications in real time. This is a wing keyless 10 keyless keyboard with what we have here, which is the McFlurry matrix finishing. Looks relatively standard in terms of proportions. We've got what looks like 6mm sides and 8mm top and bottom bezels. On the back side, we can obviously see a bajillion badges because this is a matrix keyboard. This board weighs 1.825 kilos built, which is definitely on the low end, but this is an all aluminum keyboard, and the keyboard's typing angle looks to be 5 degrees, but we're going to confirm that using our inclinometer. It is 7 degrees. Okay. Very cool. All right. Now, I did my best to try and actually find information about this board, and it has been kind of hard. What I do know is this. This was very expensive. This was run by Matrix, obviously. This is a special edition following their 2.0 ADD, so the 2.0 additional series. And this is basically just a more expensive version of that. This is a build that's spec'd very high into aesthetics and basically nothing else. So if you are a big Matrix fanboy and you live and breathe Matrix, I don't know who you are, but you're probably not going to like this video. So let's roll the intro and get into it. Alrighty, so first things first, I've had to basically turn down the brightness of my overhead camera because otherwise this will blind you in order to just show you the keyboard. So in reality, it's a little bit lighter than this. This is the most accurate color of the McFlurry finishing, which if you've ever seen a Matrix board in real life, you know what McFlurry looks like. I apologize. I tried to shoot this with more correct colors, but it will just literally blind you. So, disclosure out of the way. This is not my board. This was loaned to me by Lovador like last year for me to review it. And my plan was to steal it from him and to keep it forever. Obviously, I was going to pay him for it. This was brought on by the fact that I built and tried a 1.2 OG, and it was one of the best TKLs I had ever tried. So, logically, I got this, and, it was built. Lovador had already done a build. Now, Lovador is a lovely Middle Eastern streamer, just like me, except, I'm not lovely. He's a big sweetie pie, and he's generally pretty good at building. But I saw that he built this with alpacas. So I'm just like, Lovador's an idiot. Why would you put JWKs in a nice keyboard, So I rebuilt it with MX Blacks late last year. And then tried it, and I hated it. So we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about why this keyboard is a major disappointment and why, existence is pain. Normally, I start off by talking about the unboxing experience, but since I kind of yoinked this literally from a meetup, the unboxing experience was me grabbing it and sprinting away. It didn't come in a hard case. It didn't come with any bells and whistles. You paid $850 to get an all-aluminum TKL. Now, we'll tour it before I tell you all the things that I don't like about it. But we're going to start off strong, okay? We're going to start off strong with the externals, okay? Externals are basically the only thing this keyboard has going for it at this point. Now, all throughout this review, I am going to be critical of this keyboard, primarily due to its price point. This was $850, okay? Assuming you had a chance to actually buy it retail, because even the 2.0 additional extra units, the non-xmas versions, were upwards of $800, okay? Matrix has I don't know, somehow finessed the art of taking way too much money from people. I look at something like the Vertex, who did the arc and the angle, and I see that they have matrix finishing, and aesthetically their boards are just as good for half the price. That makes this have to fight really hard to compete at its price point. So let's go through it. All right. As mentioned at the very beginning with the B-roll, wing keyless, McFlurry finishing. There's a badge here that says Xmas edition. Let's check it out. Those of you that are not familiar with the Matrix light, I'll plug it in so you guys can see. It make a delight. It make a delight. And you can tweak this, the external and the internal, in software, which is useful. Okay, so we got Xmas edition written here. There's no other indication on the top that this is a very, very fancy, very expensive matrix board. But once we turn it over, now you see. So first things we notice is we've got the Santa hat. Very cute. It's got some little sparkles on it. See? It's 3 little stars. Those represent the $300 you overpaid for this board. And over here, we see Specia. This is the Specia edition. And it says Xmas right there. And here there are 4 little symbols in the circles that signify the $400 you overspent for this board. And since 2015. Nice. Now, there is the ongoing joke that matrix boards look like Transformers or look like Lego sets, and that is indeed true. We're not going to fully disassemble the board because there's a lot of parts, but there are 27 individual parts on this board. That's a lot of parts, okay? And I'm all for having some complexity and all of that, and I'm all for, paying the premium for the machining complexity, but this goes too far. So similar to the standard 2.0, we can see that here it kind of gets higher, it's a little bit of a badunkadunk. If it was on the other side, it'd be a forehead, but this is a badunkadunk. Right there. Comes all the way out. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more badges here, just in case you thought they were going to skimp out on badges. And right here, this is specific to the Xmas edition. Guess what it says? You guys guessing yet? It says X-mas. Nice. All right. So let's just tour through it. First of all, the front height is actually very comfortable. So again, this is a standard 7-degree angle, but this is a relatively short front height. This sits round about 20 adjusted front height with the feet. So it's very comfortable to use. The finishing is, of course, fantastic. This is a seamed board. You can see the seam here, but with matrix code, it's not like anodization where you're going to have an anodization mismatch between the top and the bottom. You could potentially have a finishing mismatch, but matrix does a very, very good job, as they should for an $850 keyboard. The overall design is obviously complex, right? So if we were to do the tour and just count the parts that are visible externally, all right, let's count the external parts. Well, we've got this big piece here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we see 15 parts that we can see from the outside, just on the back. And then obviously 16, 17, 18, and there are more parts inside. Don't you worry, there's plenty of parts. It's a matrix board. So the port is fine. It's a decent port. Generally, I judge a port by how easily I can plug in a cable without having to look at the back. And in this case, I feel around for the hole, and I can kind of just like wiggle it in, and it works. It works. There it is. We got it in. So, not bad. The mount is solid, but we'll talk about that once we actually get into the internals of the board. And when I say solid, I mean solid like a piece of metal. The feet are actually wonderful. The 1.2 OG really struggled with its feet. It had those really thin feet that came out really far out. So if you were going to push your keyboard around, the feet will just fly off. So Matrix, in their infinite wisdom, went from that to feet that literally like do nothing. I don't hate this. I really like the feet. Okay, I really like the feet. For the record, this is a rough Bussy Town desk mat. The texture on this is rough. I don't know if that makes it easier to just like move your keyboard around on the desk or harder, but this thing definitely glides. It's got some very, very glidey feet. I've never had it unintentionally move on me, which is good. But also it's fun to do this with an $850 all aluminum keyboard. Oh yeah. We can play with it on our Bussy Town desk mat. We can take it past the post office, through the roundabout, past the hospital. And it's so easy. I can do it with one finger. Look at that. One finger. Just one finger. Just move it around your desk with one finger. Oh yeah. All right. I mean, that's the gist of the externals. There's obviously a lot going on, and to be fair, this is what this board is all about. If you love this design so much that you're willing to pay $850 for it, then you probably already have one, and you've probably paid more than $850 for it. But objectively, it is a very pretty keyboard. It is. But theoretically, at $850, you are rapidly approaching the price point where going to a really good manufacturer and machining a one-off would not be a big difference. And they made a lot of these. They didn't make one. So the value perspective is poor, to be as polite as possible. So yeah, that's the externals. Let's take a look at the internals. I'll keep it very simple for you. The internals are very, very simple. I mean, it is a matrix board, so it's going to be a simple top mount. Matrix doesn't really go like wild gasket, leaf spring, stupid mounts with air speed holes in their plates and whatnot. They're very conservative when it comes to their design aesthetics. Of course, they'll go wild aesthetically, but they won't go wild structurally, is what I mean. So they stick to the tried and true. Obviously, we will be looking at those screws. Screw reviews are probably the most important parts of these reviews. If you are a long-term Simon viewer, then you would know that. There we go. And if you are not a long-term Simon viewer, keep in mind that I am not hating on this board because this is a bad board. I am hating on this board because its price point makes it a bad board. Because all things need to be judged based on what they cost. And a Toyota Camry is a wonderful car for $20,000, $30,000. It's not a wonderful car for $200,000. It's fairly basic. It's a basic comparison. All right, let's pop out that macro cam. Let's get a nice beauty shot. Like, look at that. Tell me that's not a pretty board. It is a very pretty board. It is a very, very, very pretty board. But you know what else is pretty and doesn't cost $850? Just take a screenshot of your screen right now and print this out and put it on your wall. There you go. Just saved you $850. All right, let's check out the screws. Oh, let's put them on the roundabout. It's very important that the screws are judged on the roundabout. All right, we can see a lot of gunk in them, but then again, this is a relatively old board. It's been disassembled a few times, but you see the gunk is there near the center of the thread, pretty much on all of them. And that's not gunk you want to be seeing, especially if I'm paying $850 for a board. I expect the screw threads to be pristine, the screw tabs to be pristine, and I expect the screws themselves to be brand new, and once they're screwed in, they should not have all that gunk all over the place. That's not what you want to see. The screws themselves are fine. You can see that they've held up very well, given their age. But we do see that gunk, and I am not a gunk enjoyer. All right, let's open up the back. Am I missing a screw? Nope. There we go. All right, so first things first, we see that there is a daughter board connection. So let's remove that daughter board real quick. All right, and then we will remove the plate as well, so we can tour the inside as safely as possible. Now, you'll notice simply by the screwdriver that I'm grabbing that there is something terribly wrong with this plate. It uses Phillips head screws. See, the reason we do not use Phillips head screws in keyboards is generally Phillips head screws will allow you to use the completely wrong head and still unscrew it, like I'm doing now. This is very clearly far too big for screws of this size. But since this is a Phillips head screw, it allows me to do it. And when I do it, I am damaging the screws. Whereas with something like Torx or Hex, only the correct size will be able to actually undo the screw. And when you use the correct size, you do not strip or damage the screw. This is why we do not use Phillips head screws. This is why we do not use flat head screws. The fact that this $850 keyboard uses Phillips head screws to attach the plate to the top is a crime against humanity. We can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just like the $800 you would have had to pay for this board, assuming you got a $50 discount. Alrighty, so we've got our 8 terrible Phillips head screws out. We can take a look at them real quick. So here are the nice screws over here, and here are the bad screws. So those are all Phillips head screws. Why did these need to be Phillips head screws? They absolutely did not. They could have been hex screws. For example, here is a even smaller hex screw right there. Look at that. And it is the correct size. It's knurled. It's a very nice screw. So yes. Okay. All right, you guys are going to see that there's another daughter board here that I'm going to remove. Theoretically, depending on how you want to see this, there are technically 3 daughter boards. You've got the USB daughter board, you've got the light daughter board, and you've got the controller daughter board. We'll talk about those once we get into the actual internals. But for now, we're just going to take a look at the case and see where your $850 is getting spent. Alrighty. So we will start with the case bottom. Here we are. So we see that there are actually holes that go through the case bottom. So this thing right here, this that I'm touching, is actually the feet. That means without the feet, if you were to not install the feet into this keyboard, you would have a hole that goes right through. Basically, that is definitely what I'm looking for in a $850 keyboard. Counterpoint though, these could theoretically be used to hook the case as it's being finished, because generally you want to grab it from a place that, you know, it's not going to leave any finishing marks. However, there's a hole right here, and it could have been hooked from there. So your argument is invalid. This is just bad. These 2 holes that go through the case, bad. Generally, it's bad from a, I don't know, just a cohesiveness standpoint, and it's also bad from a sound standpoint, because now you have drilled holes in a solid piece of metal. It is no longer going to conduct sound the way that it would otherwise. The best way of explaining this would be, I don't know, look at a bell and then drill some holes in the bell and see if it still sounds the same. It absolutely will not. Okay, so here on the case bottom, disregarding the daughter board for now, if we look really closely, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 easily visible Phillips head screws and 2 hex screws. Cool. That's great. That's great. So traditionally, what I would do is do a full disassembly, but the fact that these are all Phillips head means the likelihood that I actually damage this to a point where I can't put it back together is very high. If they had used proper screws, there would have been an opportunity. All right, in addition to this, there is a little milled portion here on the case bottom. This coincides where the controller would be. So the controller here is on a little bit of a, what looks like an M.2 connector, basically. And this here makes sure that you will not short it against the case bottom when you type. Alternatively, you could have just put the controller on the board, like every other keyboard. But hey, what do I know about designing keyboards? I've only designed 3. Okay, so here, while looking at the bottom, we can see that there are very, 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 very thin alignment tabs. They're exceptionally hard to see. Right there. They're very, very thin. And they go across the entirety of the board. And to be fair, the top-bottom assembly and alignment for the 2.0 ADD xmas is very good. It's a little bit of play, if you can hear that. But once it's screwed in, you don't have that play. The whole point of alignment pillars is, I mean, there's a variety of reasons to have alignment pillars. One, it makes assembly a lot easier, so you don't have to like guess and like fix it as you're screwing it in. 2, it prevents that if the board is dropped, the shear force will literally just shear the screws in half, which is theoretically possible. In reality, probably not, because this thing weighs nothing. But yeah, that's our bottom. We see our case screw holes, we see our random holes for no reason, and we see all the beautiful Phillips head screws that hold in the $850 worth of badges. All right, let's have a look at the case top. Again, kind reminder, this is not me being salty. This is me simply reiterating that I am being so critical of this board due to its price, okay? So here's our case top. Case top actually looks fine. There's no weirdness here. We can see where, you know, the LED daughter board is plugged in, but besides that, we see our case screw points and our plate screw points, which are all fine. One thing that I will touch on now is the plate feels incredibly rigid. For a simple aluminum plate, this feels a lot more rigid than it should. And I've spoken to a lot of 2.0 owners that either have sold their units because they didn't like this, or still have their units and still don't like this. The mounting style is very similar to the 1.2 OG, but for some reason, the 2.0 is just way stiffer than anticipated. So let's look at the actual mount points. So we see that we've got 2 mount points, this one here and this one here, that are very close to the stabilizers. As a matter of fact, this one is within this stabilizer landing area. So the general rule of thumb, if you're trying to get a flexi plate, is you look at where your stabs are and you put your mount points outside of that. The further out you can go, the more soft your plate will feel. Here we can see that the stabs are here, but there's a mount point here, which is literally within an inch of the actual spacebar itself. That is probably one of the reasons why this is a very, very harsh feeling plate. And then we've got this one here, which is offset on the outside of the other side of the stabilizer. Realistically, this mount point could have been moved right here where the wing keyless blocker is, and this one could have also been moved where the wing keyless blocker is. This one here is fairly simple. It sits between the right arrow and the down arrow. This one sits under your scroll lock. This one sits on your F10. This one sits between your F4 and your F5, and then this one sits right on your escape. Not the best mount points. If I was going to redo the mount points personally, again, it's up to Matrix to decide what they want from a design perspective. So, hey, what do I know? I'm just a keyboard man. All right. Obviously, before we move on to the plate and PCB assembly, the internal finishing is spectacular. It's just as good as the external finishing. Generally, with boards, the quality rating of the board is determined by how good the externals are. And generally, you could potentially have some blemishes on the inside, you know, hook marks, something like that, small little things, and that would still, according to most makers and manufacturers, count as an A stock board. This finishing is what I would consider S stock. It's not something that most manufacturers or makers would even, like, I don't know, admit that S stock exists, but S stock means perfect top and bottom matching. That means reflectivity match, that means color match, and also perfect internals. This is an S stock board. Generally, this is more of a metric when it comes to anodization, because for anodization, you might have a color mismatch, you might have a reflectivity mismatch, or, you know, you could have something going on with the inside. With matrix finishing, to be fair, matrix finishing historically has been very good, and that is something that they do absolutely fantastically. All right, let's talk about all these daughter boards, and then we'll look at the PCB and plate. All right. So, first of all of the daughter boards use a wonderful red PCB. I love that. The JSTs are not heat shrunk, which is fine. Generally, if you're trying to save on space, you don't want a big piece of rubber around this, so this is absolutely fine. The length of these JSTs are great. One of the most annoying things is when your JST connector, you really struggle to get it in there. So this looks fine. The daughter board assembly is held on by 2 Phillips head screws. I know what I've been saying about Phillips head screws, but when you're dealing with something this small, it's kind of acceptable because it's not really load bearing by any means, but it's fine if you're using M.2, M2 Phillips head screws here, which they are. The daughter board is very, very simple. There's basically no circuitry on board. No, actually, I'm wrong. There are a couple of resistors and a couple of, let's try and get that up there. Yeah, there we go. So we do see some capacitors over there. We do see some resistors. So there might be some very, very, very basic ESD protection on the daughter board, which is good. I mean, you don't need to have it on the daughter board. You can have it on the main board. Yeah, we can see it says Matrix there, very, very small. So I'm glad that the $850 are going into at least, you know, something that, like, I wouldn't say matters, but the little things. It's the little things. It's the little things that make a difference between what I would consider a fair value $400 board and a fair value $600 board. It's the little things. The little things are the most important. And something as simple as simply just having a little Matrix badge on there, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right, so this JST goes onto the main board, which we will check out later. And on the top of the keyboard here, we've got the LED assembly. I have no idea how they're doing this with just 4 wires, because there's actually 2 controllable LEDs here. You've got the internal LED and the external LED. So I have no idea how they're doing this. I'm not a big smart PCB man, so it is what it is. It's pretty cool. Okay. One final thing is prior to looking at the PCB and the plate, sorry for debating you for the 3rd time, but it also comes with a piece of silicone. That goes right there. So pass your JST through there. There we go. I've built this with and without. Honestly, it makes very little difference. The sound profile of the board is not great. It's an all aluminum board, but even for an all aluminum board, it's not great. All right. The fact that this is cut out, I don't like that, for the record, because you're adding inconsistency in terms of sound. However, when you originally get this, it's not cut out. Like there's little tear marks where you can actually remove this, but it's filled in by default. And if you choose, you can actually remove basically the letters, which I did for memes, and then I couldn't find it and put it back. So, all right, let's start with PCB. Let's start with PCB. All right. So here on the PCB, we're going to start with the most obvious thing right there. That is an ATmega32U4. 1 second. Nope. That is an STM. This is an ARM controller on a little daughter board. Now, why would you want to do something like this? Well, it offers you options of using whatever controller is actually available at the time. Because as long as your pinouts link to your matrix, right? Then theoretically you could swap out a daughter board that uses an ARM controller for a daughter board that uses an ATmega controller. Kind of cool, kind of big brain. The implementation is not as great as the idea because there's a switch under there. Let's take that out. There we go. So there's a switch under there. And I don't know, if you've ever built a keyboard before, you probably know that switches have pins. Those pins are made out of metal. So this is a piece of tape to try and protect the daughter board. And the actual pins themselves have been cut short as well. So you are basically required to cut them short. These guys right here. I would try and get a lower angle, but that's as good as I can do for now. So you have to clip these, otherwise they will just short everything out and you're not going to have a good time. While we're here, let's take a look at the actual daughter board. Let's give it a sec. Boom. Also says matrix. Very cool. We've got our controller. We've got our, I assume our clock or something. Yeah, that's our clock. It says 8,000 megahertz. Oh yeah. That's so many megahertz. But yeah, you got your basic daughter board assembly. I think this is M.2, like early M.2. I think there's like a couple of variants of M.2, but this seems like M.2 in terms of like the connector, not like the protocol it's using. Which, cool enough, because I assume it'd be easy to actually find this part versus, you know, more unique parts. All right, that means that now that we've taken the controller off, basically this board has no controller, which is interesting because there is something over here. And I'm not sure what this thing is. I'm going to flip the board over so I can show you on the macro cam. But this thing right here is interesting. I'm not sure what it is. I know it's upside down right now, so I hope you guys can read upside down. So it just says PH424A. So I'm not sure what that is. Maybe it is some chip that handles power of some sort. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's a GPS tracker. It's obviously not that, okay? But like, I don't know what it is. And if you actually know what this is, please let me know. It's interesting. I've never seen one of these. I mean, you know, I can see resistors, diodes, capacitors, etc. across the board, which is to be expected because you need to deliver power everywhere. But that, I could not identify it. We've got basic pinouts here if you want to plug it into a UART. And yeah, I mean, you can tell that like this is a very low frills PCB, okay? Maybe electrically it is very complex, but visually it's not much to look at. It's just a white PCB, like a little off-white, you know, a little gray-white PCB. not much going on. Nothing is labeled. So like, if I was theoretically gonna, I don't know, build with a different bottom row, I'm not sure which ones would be which. If I potentially have a problem with my P key, I have to remember where P is when I flip it over. Oh, it's here. Okay, so that's P. Wait, no, that's P. But if they were labeled, it would have been easier. Yeah. All right, let's get the controller back on so I don't lose it. There we go. This is also held in by a Phillips head, but again, that's kind of okay. For stuff like this, it's kind of okay. As long as like you're not holding like load and tightening super hard, it's kind of okay because, users are very unlikely to strip it. All right, so here we've got the two JST connectors on the, I was going to say motherboard. Technically, this is the motherboard because we've got 3 daughters. This one is actually labeled USB and this one is actually labeled LED. So they do know that they can label things, which is amazing. Good job. All right, so PCB has not a great deal going on, but like, it's fine. All right, and then plate. Now, generally with a plate, what are we looking for? We're looking for, are there meme holes? Okay, are you doing memes? And we can see that there's a little bit of memes. You can see there's a little bit of memes in terms of the clear separation between the F row and the 60% cluster. As a matter of fact, the 60% cluster and everything else. Now, generally, when you start seeing things like this, where there is a clear cutout, this is to allow the plate to flex, okay? Sure, you're essentially trading off a little bit of flex by raising up the general pitch of the keyboard, but if you're trying to get a little bit more flex out of a plate, I understand. This doesn't work. This plate feels like a completely solid plate. If I were to blindfold 100 people, 100 keyboard experts, and tell them, based on feel, how many flex cuts does this plate have, pretty much everybody would tell you 0. This is an incredibly, incredibly stiff plate, which is weird because I'm pretty sure this is 5053 aluminum, which is basically the standard aluminum we use for plates. I'm just tapping it to try and get an acoustic idea because like a 6 series or a 7 series is going to sound a little bit more high-pitched. This sounds like 5053. I might be wrong, but there are no specs anywhere because Matrix, yay. So yeah, the other thing we look for is meme acoustic cuts. So are there meme cuts under the control or caps lock? Aha, there are. Okay, so we are doing memes now. Great. Are there memes here? No, okay. So are there memes here? There are not. Okay, so we have located all of the memes. The memes are as follows. You've got the 60% cut. You've got the step bro cut. However, this is not necessarily a meme cut because you can access the UART pinouts here. If you look very closely, you can see those 6 pins in there. Generally, this is also an acceptable place to put a topside reset button. And if I'm not mistaken, there is no reset button anywhere. Yeah. There might be something that you can bridge for reset. It's either that one or that one, but it's not labeled. Now, generally with an ARM controller, there are some nice things to it. If programmed correctly, you have the equivalent of boot magic. So you hold down a key, you plug it in, and it will open up as a mass storage device on your computer. And you can literally just drag in the hex file and it'll work, which is great. But let's say you had completely trashed your firmware. Well, a physical reset button accessible somewhere would be great. For me, I prefer it's accessible without having to disassemble the board, so I can just press it. Otherwise, have it on the board and have it labeled, because these UART connections are not labeled. This is not labeled. This is not labeled. So I don't know what any of these are. And then we have, what is this? There are 2 random circles that have exposed pads. What are they? I don't know. They could be anything. So yeah, plate is not great. I see what they were trying to do. I see that they were trying to get a little bit more flex out of this, but this feels incredibly stiff. It feels incredibly stiff. Now, some of you might say, "Oh, but Simon, like it's fine. Like boards can be stiff and boards can like be softer." Yeah, absolutely. The only reason why I was so shocked was because after typing on the 1.2, because the 1.2 had just an aluminum plate. The 1.2 OG actually felt great. By the way, I've reviewed the 1.2 OG. It's a good board. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The only reason why I had any interest in this board, like at all. So originally, prior to me taking this from Lovador, I thought this was like, like a $550 board. And even then I was like, this is really expensive. And then I typed on it, I'm like, wow, this is really shitty for a $550 board. I found out later it's an $850 board. So like there really is no excuse. Now, again, nothing wrong with being stiff. However, other Matrix boards are not this stiff. Matrix very clearly has a style, and this does not match the style. So, yeah, I mean that's the internals, and that's the typing field. Now, in terms of the typing sound, it's an all aluminum board. Okay, it's an all aluminum board, and to be fair, we've had some all aluminum boards, especially recently, like the Arc 60, which just sound freaking great. This is not. This, in terms of sound, what would it sound like most? It sounds like an incredibly boring, incredibly simple TKL. And not in a good way. It has no personality to it. It has no boominess. It has no, there's nothing there. There's nothing. It's like, it's an incredibly bland typing experience, especially for the price point. And if I wanted an incredibly bland typing experience, I could buy something a lot cheaper than this. And when I say bland, okay, there is bland and there is classic. Okay, classic is like an OTD Corsa, for example, 360C, or a DJE, a CL, something like that. Maybe KMAC 1.2 or something, or 2.1. This doesn't feel classic. This just feels boring, and this sounds boring, and this is so obscenely expensive for what it is. I don't know how I feel about it. So in terms of like my actual suggestions for building one of these, I mean, please don't buy one of these. For the price that you're paying, you're just getting a pretty keyboard. And if like I said it very early in the review, like if pretty is all you care about, just take a picture of it and print it out. You'll save $850. Because for most of my boards, and I have like way more that you can't see, I enjoy typing on my boards. This was one of the few boards that I enjoyed having it in the cabinet and not type on it. And that's kind of shitty. Imagine having a keyboard where its job of being a keyboard is what it fails at, but it's pretty. It's very counterintuitive for somebody trying to buy a keyboard. But let's say theoretically you do have a 2.0, maybe a non-xmas edition, okay? And you're really trying to brighten it up. You're trying to like at least give it a little bit of something, I mean, you can see here that I'm using DCS caps, and the DCS caps, at the very least, add a tiny little bit of boominess to the build. And this is built with JWK Alpacas, and those also help out a little bit. So going with like a little bit of a brighter switch and a little bit of like a thinner cap did help at least get something out of this board. I had this built with Cherry MX Blacks and standard ABS, which is what I assumed would be like the most neutral. It was so much worse. It was so boring. It's, you know the meme of, you listen to a typing test and everybody says it sounds like a keyboard. This is one of the most sounding keyboards of all time. So my recommendation is if you have a 2.0 ADD, go wild. Get some clickies in there. Get some nice tactiles in there. If you have the option to get another plate, please get another plate. This plate is terrible. cut one out of polypropylene or PE or palm or literally anything that's not this plate, and then slap some crazy wild switches in it. This is a board where the aesthetics are 10 out of 10, but the sound and feel are nearly a 0 out of 10 in terms of interestingness. Like, it feels fine, it sounds fine. It sounds like a keyboard, it feels like a keyboard. So like, but in terms of mediocrity, it is the most mediocre sounding and feeling board that I have used in so long. So my build recommendation is just spice it up. Spice it up. Go wild. You want to get like super thick caps on there, try to see what that does to the sound? Go for it. You want to get super thin caps? You want to get like really bright sounding switches, really like loud clicky switches? Absolutely go for it. My only build recommendation is do not do a boring build in this. Do not go MX blacks. Do not go low weight linears. Do not go ABS caps. You will have the most mediocre typing experience of all time. And not classic, mediocre. So those are my notes. Following this will be a typing test of this board, followed by my summary. Yep. Yep. So, I mean, you heard it. You heard it. You know what it sounds like. And, I mean, you kind of know what I think of it. The TLDR is $850 for an all aluminum keyboard. If this was not a special edition matrix, if this was made by anybody else, and had anybody walked up to me and said, Simon, there's an $850 keyboard, it's all aluminum, should I buy it? My response would be, it is a scam, because there is no reason an all aluminum keyboard should cost $850. If it was all brass, sure. If it went wild with the weights, sure. If it was like, like maybe like 1 to 5 of them were ever made, sure, fine. But no. This is a incredibly underwhelming board for what it is. It's a very pretty keyboard, okay? It's very pretty. And that's all it has going for it, unfortunately. The typing experience is subpar. The sound is subpar. It's a very boring board. And keep in mind, when you're using the keyboard, okay, you're looking at the top, not the bottom, okay? So when using the keyboard, it looks like a keyboard. And it barely feels and sounds like a keyboard, and it's just very disappointing. This keyboard is a wonderful keyboard to have sit in your cabinet and never be used. And therefore, means it is objectively a terrible keyboard. Now, I know a lot of people like Matrix. I like Matrix. Matrix does good stuff. They do. This is not it. This is absolutely not it. Okay? This is absolutely not it. If you really like this rear design, you can get a one-of-one machined version of this, of just the back, with like all the parts and everything, and it would look really pretty, and you could put it behind you, and it would be, you know, as fulfilling to type on as this keyboard, even though it wouldn't even be a keyboard, it would just be a piece of metal. So yeah, that's my take on the 2.0 ADD. I'm very sorry to anybody that ever bought one. And if you bought one and you like it, like, don't take this as a personal attack. This is obviously all my opinion. You're allowed to have an incorrect opinion. So yeah, one of the things that brings me happiness is that this thing will no longer be in my house, and it'll go back to Lovedor. So on that note, screw, screw, screw your board gently on the bussy town. Merrily, merrily, merrily Christmas. Life is but a clown. God, end me. I can't believe I wanted this keyboard. What is wrong with me? I need to see a doctor.